Hello and croeso. Welcome to Show Racism the Red Card session number 2 of 3 DARPL sessions for teachers and educators.
If you would like to continue your anti-racist professional learning journey with DARPL, please consider joining our Enhanced Leadership series. This is a series of 6 professional learning days with a combination of in-person and virtual learning. We run 2 cohorts each academic year, with cohorts in North and South Wales each time. To register, please click the link on the slide or visit the DARPL website for more information. If you would like continued support and guidance for your learning organisation, please consider joining the DARPL Advocacy Network. Each associated learning organisation is able to request bespoke professional learning which can be linked to their school improvement or development plans to support them to become anti-racist learning organisations. For more information on becoming a DAN school, please click the link and complete the inquiry form.
First, a little bit about Show Racism the Red Card. Show Racism the Red Card is the UK's biggest anti-racism education charity. We use sports stars and other role models as a tool of engagement to bring children, young people and adults alike into conversations about race and racism with the aim of empowering people to be anti-racist in their own spaces. Our work includes direct anti-racism sessions with children and young people. These range from short-term, one-off education sessions to years-long pupil ambassador work, such as through our Leaders of Now programme. Our adult work is similarly diverse and takes place both in person and online, covering a range of topics from definitions of racism and anti-racism, self-reflection, terminology, resources, recognising and responding to racism, and action planning. We also offer an auditing service. Show Racism the Red Card runs a host of awareness-raising initiatives, including our schools competition, Wear Red Day in October, Month of Action, and community iftars. Alongside this, we produce educational resources such as teacher packs linked to big events like the World Cup, Euros, Six Nations, and Olympics and Paralympics. Finally, we produce research, including our most recent A Work in Progress report, which we use to lobby for change in Wales. For more information on any of these things, please visit Show Racism the Red Card's website, theredcard.org. Today's Show Racism the Red Card for DARPL session aims to demystify terminology. We will be looking at acceptable and unacceptable terms and providing some history and context around racist language that can be used to educate others. We will also be exploring resources that can be used within classrooms and the wider school to promote an anti-racism message and facilitate an inclusive environment. Whilst many of you may be working through the content alone, we are aware that some settings may choose to do this as a larger group. If this is the case, please take into account these 3 ground rules. Firstly, responsible communication. Consider what you are saying before you speak. Remember, words have power, and so consider the impact these may have on your fellow participants before you speak. Secondly, openness, honesty, and confidentiality. Whether you are alone or in a group, openness to learning and honesty, even if that is just with yourself, is vital to effectively taking on board received learning. If you are in a group setting, please respect confidentiality and please do not share anything anyone else has said unless they give you permission or unless it is a safeguarding issue. Finally, bravery. Being brave can take many forms. If you have lived experience of racism, some of the topics covered may be triggering or bring up unexpected memories or thoughts. Bravery here may take the form of being kind to yourself, taking breaks and breathers as appropriate, and undertaking activities that make you feel safe, for example, talking to people you trust. For everyone, bravery may also take the form of following up the session with questions for Show Racism the Red Card, or recognising that you may not have got it right in the past and accepting and changing that. Pause here to reflect on anything that has come up for you since session 1. This might relate to something discussed during the session or something you've since seen, heard or read, perhaps in the news? If you're working in a group, take a few minutes to share any reflections you're comfortable discussing. At the end of session 1, we spent some time considering the barriers our pupils from global majority backgrounds may face. In 1983, sociologist Marilyn Fry created the birdcage analogy to explain the pervasive nature of sexism. This idea is also transferable to racism. If we consider a birdcage, looking closely at just one wire might mean we cannot see the other wires, meaning we do not understand why a bird would stay trapped. However, when we step back and take a broader view, we see that it is through a system of sometimes overlapping wires that this bird is kept caged. Let's consider some of these wires. Racism can show up in many different ways, sometimes overt, sometimes subtle. It might look like offensive costumes such as blackface, being avoided on public transport, or assumptions based on stereotypes. It can be seen in a lack of representation in literature, being spoken to slowly despite English being your first language, or in the statues we walk past every day. It appears in headlines and on social media feeds, and was brought sharply into focus during events such as the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. This is why language, particularly the use of the N-word, can be deeply traumatic, especially when used without context or warning. It carries a weight shaped by lived experience, history, and the accumulation of everyday harms. We'll be exploring language in more detail shortly. When a person experiences racism, it can lead to racial trauma, which may present in both emotional and physical ways. It's important to be aware of the symptoms shown on screen and consider how they might impact the children and young people we work with so we can offer appropriate support. For instance, decreased immune functioning could lead to lower attendance in our pupils, while heightened sensitivity to threat might result in behaviours that are perceived as challenging in the classroom. Instead of responding punitively, it's vital to look beneath the behaviour and offer support that acknowledges the potential impact of racial trauma. Further guidance can be found on the Anna Freud Centre's website. Show Racism the Red Card is frequently made aware of teachers using outdated materials and reading out racist language in texts without thought. The news story here, around Of Mice and Men, states an outraged mum has claimed a teacher repeatedly read out a racist word in front of her black daughter, despite the girl's protests. The response from the school's head teacher was, "We choose not to censor the text because, by deleting it from our curriculum, we would deny our students the right to a full understanding of racial prejudice over the course of history." If a school has paid sufficient consideration to the texts it uses and determines that, despite containing racist language, they hold educational value and relevance to both their pupils and the wider world, then such texts must be handled with thought and care. Sufficient warning should be given to pupils that racist language is contained in the text. This language should not be read aloud, both to minimise the impact that it may have on individuals and to avoid the risk of normalising or legitimising its use. It's essential that the language is contextualised and framed as an opportunity for learning. Educators must keep a close watch on any pupils who may be affected and ensure that support is offered discreetly and sensitively. Many schools have policies in place around this. Do you know your school's policy? Take a moment to reflect on how you might approach this in your own classroom. In the previous example, we touched on the impact of language. It can be easy to underestimate the impact and power of language, but language is a very powerful method of structuring attitudes. It shapes how we perceive ourselves, others, and the world around us. We must also note that words have power, and the intention behind their use doesn't necessarily alter the effect they can have. And that's something important to remember. Sometimes people can use racist words and language, and it's dismissed as, "That's not how they meant it." But the impact on the individual can be significant. Language also contributes to the creation and perpetuation of stereotypes. We'll explore this further by looking at specific examples shortly. Language evolves over time. A good example is how, when the internet first emerged, it was often referred to as the information superhighway. That phrase would sound outdated today, yet at the time it was widely used. This shows that we're all capable of learning, adapting, and changing the way we use language. Just as our vocabulary around technology has shifted, so too can our language around identity, race, and respect. We're now going to begin exploring some terms in more detail. The words that will appear on screen are not written in full. They've been asterisked, but we recognise that even in this form, they can still be triggering. Please remember that bravery includes taking a break when it's right for you. If you are working in a group, take care to discuss the words by referring to their allocated number so as not to accidentally use racist language. On the screen are a number of commonly used words. Pause here to take some time to think to yourself or discuss with your group which words you might find acceptable or unacceptable. Remember to refer to the words by their numbers and not in full. How did you get along? Perhaps there were some words which you were more confident with. Perhaps there were one or two you weren't sure of. This is not an exhaustive list, but these words are the ones we are asked about most frequently, particularly by children and young people. We'll take you through each of these words now, including how we would frame those in discussion with our pupils. Numbers 1 and 3, black and white, are acceptable words to use as descriptors of skin colour. They must not be used as or with an insult or unnecessarily in a way that might other individuals. For example, so you know my friend Paul, he's black, he scored a hat-trick this week. This is unnecessary information for the story, and as it is unlikely that Paul's ethnicity would have been mentioned if he was white, it establishes whiteness as the norm. Number 2 is an unacceptable word, as it has been used in the past to other people who make up part of the global majority. In places like the US, it was tied to systems of segregation. Signs would explicitly state, "No number 2 allowed." Although segregation wasn't written into UK law in the same way, there was little protection against this kind of discrimination until the 1960s, and examples like housing adverts from this time excluding people using this term can still be found. Additionally, it was a label that was placed on people with black skin, not something that this very large group of people chose for themselves. Numbers 5 and 6, mixed heritage and mixed race, are acceptable terms to use, meaning the bringing together of one or multiple heritages. However, we must understand that when we refer to race, we are referring not to biological categories, but politically created groups, for instance based on skin colour. Number 4 is not acceptable, based on both its meaning and its history. The second part of the phrase comes from the Latin word castus, literally translating as pure. This purity referred to whiteness under systems of white supremacy. An example of this was during the transatlantic slave trade, where enslaved women would be raped by their white slave owners and become pregnant with children of mixed heritage. These children would be sold back into slavery at a higher price, as they were marketed as number 4 or half pure, and were deemed more socially acceptable to be put to work inside the house rather than in fields or on plantations. The way we might explain this term to children and young people is to talk about the law which was in place in the state of Victoria in Australia up until the 1970s, known as the Number 4 Act. This act saw children of mixed heritage born to one white parent and one Indigenous Australian parent forcibly removed from their families with the aim of ridding them of their Indigenous culture. They were known as the Stolen Generation. Therefore, due to the terrible meaning and traumatic history, number 4 is unacceptable. Numbers 10 and 11, gypsy and traveller, are acceptable terms to use to describe somebody's culture, but they are not interchangeable. There is a video following these next couple of slides called Roads from the Past that examines this, as well as the historical origins of Gypsy, Roma and Traveller people in the UK in more depth. This is a fantastic resource to use with adults, but also with children and young people from years 3 and 4 upwards. Numbers 12 and 13 are extremely rude and offensive words to use towards someone of Gypsy, Roma or Traveller heritage. Whilst there are many theories around the histories and meanings of the words, including being linked to working on turnpikes or terms making people feel like outsiders if they had one Gypsy parent and one non-Gypsy parent, what is clear is how these words are used now. They are often used as synonyms for being scruffy or stealing, and they reinforce negative, hurtful stereotypes. Number 9 is not an acceptable word. Some people claim it's just short for Pakistani, but it holds a lot of hurt and trauma for many people. It is linked to P-word bashing, a cruel phenomenon in the 1970s and 80s that saw far-right groups such as the National Front attacking and targeting people they perceived to be from Pakistan or who had brown skin. The aim was to intimidate and scare them into leaving the area so that it remained all white. Unfortunately, this is not a thing of the past, with video footage showing similar attacks happening during the racist riots of summer 2024. Therefore, this word is laced with fear for many people. Number 8 is another unacceptable word. Many young people report seeing it on social media without the letter Y on the end. It is a rude and offensive way of referring to people of Chinese heritage or perceived to be of Chinese heritage, and since an increase in migration to the UK from China in the early 1900s, has always been used as a term to other. Finally, number 7, the N-word. This is perhaps the word that Show Races in the Red Card gets asked about most by children and young people. It carries a huge amount of power due to its usage throughout history to demean and degrade people with black and brown skin, particularly during the transatlantic slave trade, where enslaved people would often be referred to by this word rather than their names in a bid to dehumanize them. It was used by extreme groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, who would mainly attack and target young black men who tried to challenge racist systems in society. And they would lynch them, chanting this word. So for some, it was the last word they heard before they died. It carries significant weight. However, many young people ask if it's now okay to use this word, as they might say, black people can use it and it's used in music. It's important here to explain that groups such as the NWA in the 1980s and Jay-Z in the 1990s wanted to reclaim the word. They said that it had been used as such a term of hate that they wanted to take it back for themselves, change what it means and take the power out of it. Whilst this may have worked in some contexts, there are still many people who have significant trauma after having this word hurled at them as a term of abuse. Pupils sometimes also ask, what about the N-word pass? This is an image shared across social media whereby if a black child shares it with a white child, they believe they have permission to use the N-word. We would explain to children that one person cannot speak for all, and many people have different experiences when it comes to language. If we know a word can be traumatic or hurtful to someone, we would not risk using it. When considering appropriate terminology, you might consider using the phrase, those who make up part of the global majority, which redresses the balance of assuming whiteness is the norm across the globe when it is not. It's been coined in response to the limiting and often marginalising use of the word minority. It recognises that people with black or brown skin actually make up the majority, over 80% of the global population. To illustrate how these assumptions can affect our perceptions, there's an interesting resource here called Visualising the True Size of Africa. Africa is the continent with the largest population of people with black skin. While we may know that Africa is a large continent, we often underestimate its scale due to how maps are designed. Flattening a sphere onto a flat map distorts size. Countries nearer the poles appear much larger than they actually are, while those near the equator, like those in Africa, seem smaller. Africa is actually not that far out of proportion, but other countries further from the equator are inflated from their true sizes. This distortion subtly reinforces misconceptions about power, scale, and importance. Let's return to some other umbrella terms you may have heard. The term people of colour originated in the United States, where Black and Latino women came together around shared political aims and chose this label for themselves. Because it was self-selected, it is generally considered acceptable. You may also have heard the term brown, which is used by some people of South Asian heritage who feel it more accurately reflects their skin colour and their experiences. However, not everyone is comfortable with this term. As always, it is best to be specific where possible and to refer to people in the terms they wish to be identified by, unless, of course, those terms are offensive or racist, such as those we discussed earlier. On the next slide, you'll find the Roads from the Past video, which was released on the Traveller Times website. This site was created by people from traveller backgrounds who recognised that their heritage was often only mentioned in mainstream media in connection with negative events. They wanted to counter this narrative and share their own stories. The video is full of valuable information. Take some time to watch it now or save it to watch later.
Gypsies, Roma and travellers are three words that stand for a lot of different people. Just like with everyone, Gypsy, Roma and traveller people have things in common with each other, and some things that are different. But to understand this story now, it's important to go back to the beginning. Living in one place is a recent thing. People were nomads for 99% of our history, travelling around to survive. Then about 10,000 years ago, something changed. People realised that if they grew crops, harvested and stored them, they would have a better chance of surviving hard times. Where people had tracked animals or travelled with their herds, settled farming became the norm. But not everyone changed their ways. Many people didn't want to settle down, or bad harvests, droughts, floods, war would send them back on the move. In Britain and Ireland, nomadic peoples were probably well established by about 1000 AD. There were the Celtic traveller peoples, the Irish travellers who called themselves the Parvi or Minkers, and across the Irish Sea there were the Scottish travellers, the Norkin. They had their own languages. The Irish travellers talked the Gammon and the Scottish travellers spoke the Bula Ragad. Both have sometimes been called the Cant. Some travellers worked the land. Others were musicians and storytellers who brought entertainment and news to the people of the countryside. Some were horse dealers, tinsmiths and metalworkers. For centuries they lived in tents and travelled mostly on foot. One traditional name for the Irish travellers was An Lucht Shul, which means the walking people. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, a people called the Roma or Romanis had been travelling west, starting from northwest India. The word Roma comes from an old word Rom, meaning man or husband. It isn't related to Rome or Romania, they just look similar. In the late 1400s, a group arrived in Scotland. They were received by King James IV. They told fortunes, had exotic-looking clothes, darker skin and an Indian language. Romani. They stood out from everyone else and were referred to as Egyptians, a word that eventually turned into gypsies. As time went on, they did much of the same work as other travellers. Some were specialists in other trades, like wickerwork, charcoal burning, even pearl fishing and snake catching. In the 1500s and 1600s, there were some attempts to expel them from the land. In some cases, people were deported across the sea, or even hanged for being gypsies. But by the 1700s, Romani gypsies lived all over Britain. Some families mixed with the travellers who were already here. Down in England and Wales, like elsewhere, most nomads lived in tents made from arched sticks stuck in the ground with canvas on top. But some gypsies and travellers put their tents on flat carts to keep them off the cold, wet ground. The traveller's wagon was born. The bow-top became a common sight in Ireland as well as Britain. Later, wagons were purpose-built in various shapes and sizes. Mobile works of art. Over the years, travellers went back and forth across the Irish Sea and the borders of mainland Britain. Some worked on the canals and motorways, fought in wars for their country, and many became self-employed. They did jobs like scrap metal collecting, roofing, flower selling, and tarmacking. Trades you could take on the move, trades that continue today. Romani people from other parts of Europe continued to come, in small numbers at first, with more arriving in the 21st century. So those three words, gypsies, Roma, travellers, they hide a lot of meaning. They get used in lots of ways, but they're just the names of people, like English, Indian, or Italian. Over the years, some travelling people have settled down. Some move less often, and others hardly at all. But however they live, they take their languages, memories, and cultures with them. They are proud of their roots and their family, and why shouldn't they be? After all, if you go back far enough, there's a traveller in every story.
Hearing directly from communities like this reminds us how important language and representation are, and how the words we use can either empower or marginalise. While we've explored some commonly used terms, it must be remembered that this is not an exhaustive list, and that words change over time depending on how they are used. If you're not sure about a word, a useful formula to remember is population plus power plus history. Who is involved? Did those people have power and voice to choose? And how has the term been used in the past? When addressing the use of language in schools, it's important to consider how often racist comments can be dismissed as banter or just a joke. Take a moment to consider this. How can we recognise this happening? How can we support those involved? If you're working in a group, pause here to discuss. Dismissing racist language as banter can blur the line between humour and harm. While one pupil might claim something they said was light-hearted, the impact on the person targeted can be serious and lasting. How do they really feel about it? Are they laughing along to avoid standing out further or to protect themselves from more attention? It's important to recognise that intent does not negate impact. Labelling racist language as banter not only minimises the experience of the person affected, but also normalises harmful behaviour. Some key points to finish this section on language and terminology. Everyone is an individual, so be specific where you can be. Avoid othering language, as the norm is usually centred in whiteness. Do not verbalise racist language, even for education purposes. If you are unsure, use people-focused language, for example, people with Indian heritage, and avoid suggesting that there is only one worldview and that people experience the world in the same way. Everyone is different. Everyone will have different ways of dealing with racism, but it is important to listen, learn, and take this into account. These same principles apply when considering the resources, activities, and wider messaging we use in our schools. The intent behind a resource or event may be positive, but what about the impact? Let's look at a couple of scenarios. Consider what went well for each of these and even better if. Number 1. Your school is twinned with another in Africa. Pupils are encouraged to donate old clothes and shoes. What are the positives here? What are the potential issues that could arise? And number 2, your school holds a diversity day. What are the positives here? What are the potential issues that could arise? If you're completing this learning alone, pause to think about each scenario, or if you are in groups, pause here to discuss these together. Let's look at some key considerations for scenario number 1. Perhaps you discussed or thought of some of these. We'll start with the positives. Twinning with a school in Africa offers rich, real-life learning opportunities. It can deepen geographical knowledge, build understanding of different cultures, languages, sports and hobbies, and create meaningful connections across continents. Donating pre-loved clothes can also support work on sustainability, for example, thinking about recycling, charity and global citizenship. However, it's important to carefully consider the messages we send. Have we asked what the partner school actually needs? Are we assuming they want donations of clothes and shoes? And are those items even appropriate for their climate or context? If not requested, these gestures can unintentionally reinforce stereotypes or suggest an imbalance of power. We must also be mindful of the wider narrative. Young people often have limited or skewed views of Africa, shaped by charity appeals that focus only on poverty. What do we think about the wording there? Old clothes. We need to be careful not to feed into these stereotypes. Africa is a vast, diverse continent made up of many different countries and communities, and we must reflect that. Twinning should be a mutual exchange where both partners bring value. It's not about rescuing, it's about sharing and learning together with respect and specificity. So, this twinning could be valuable so long as we don't fall into the traps of stereotypes. A diversity day can be a powerful celebration when it's meaningful, inclusive, and part of a wider diverse curriculum. When learners are supported to share their traditional dress, cultures, and family traditions alongside ongoing learning, it can strengthen their kenevin, their sense of belonging, and help them feel seen and valued in their school community. However, if Diversity Day is the only moment where difference is acknowledged, it risks becoming a token gesture. Without meaningful representation throughout the curriculum, events like these can feel performative, even othering for children from global majority backgrounds. If your school already threads diversity and celebration through everyday teaching, then a well-planned day, especially one shared by pupil voice, can be a joyful and affirming experience. The key is to make sure it's not a one-off, but part of an authentic, ongoing commitment to inclusion, one that's woven through the entire school experience. This is echoed in a quote from the Welsh Government. It is an old quote, but still very relevant. They said, "The curriculum, resources, and learning climate all play a vital role in helping learners to feel included and accepted in school, to feel a sense of belonging. Learners from all sections of the community need to see themselves positively reflected and valued." It's that sense of belonging that's key. If we spread diversity and inclusion through everything we do, pupils will see that they're part of the school. Look at the environment you're working in and ask yourself, what message is this sending? Here we will explore how the resources and displays used in education settings can support or impact our learners. Are the messages in our displays appropriate? For example, this African mask display could be easily tweaked into a valuable learning experience by being more specific. Who wears these masks? Where is this and why? The display shown here doesn't specify which tribe is being explored. This is a dangerous narrative that suggests all of the inhabitants of Africa are part of a single tribe who share the same cultural practices and all wear masks. We're running the danger here of reinforcing stereotypes and allowing children to grow up thinking that Africa is a single country rather than a vast continent made up of many countries, each with its own rich and diverse cultures. If the learning includes African tribes, it's important to be specific. Naming tribes like the Zulu, Amhara, or Himba helps avoid generalization and supports more accurate and respectful learning. This poster, I Am a Muslim, has some good content. However, it suggests that there is only one specific way to be a Muslim. It shows religious dress, headwear, and journeying to Mecca, which does not apply to all Muslims. Showing supportive material for religions is fantastic, and this poster could be useful so long as it's not the only representation of Muslims that young people see. The work we did in session 1 around identity and challenging our own norms is particularly relevant when we consider the resources we use in our settings. Are your resources limited to your own experiences and immediate environment, or do they reflect a broader, more inclusive view of the world? Is this a space where all pupils feel they belong? Can all pupils see themselves reflected, or just some? Do you have dolls with a variety of skin tones and hair textures to play with? Are your role play areas inclusive? For example, does your hairdresser's corner include products for coily hair textures? Your art supplies should allow children to represent themselves and their families authentically. Every child should be able to find materials, such as colouring pencils, that closely match their own skin tone. When choosing images for presentations or displays, ensure they show diversity across nationality, gender, family structures, and skin tone. Pupils need access to resources that not only reflect their own worlds, but also expand their imagination beyond their immediate surroundings. And finally, take time to learn how to pronounce every child's name correctly. A name that isn't Eurocentric might feel unfamiliar, but names are deeply meaningful, so we must try. Explain to children how important it is to say their name correctly, and that if you've made a mistake, you will try again and again until it is correct. If you make a mistake, acknowledge it. I'm sorry I pronounced your name wrong. Thank you for correcting me. It's important to me to say it properly. That effort shows respect and sends a powerful message to every child. It's not just your displays and resources that matter. Your message does too. Many of us would expect those around us to know that we stand against racism, but sadly this is not always the case. We had a child tell us during a school visit that they had been the victim of racism. When we asked whether they had reported it, the pupil said they hadn't. They asked, "How do I know my teacher isn't racist?" It's a valid question. If a pupil isn't sure who they can trust, they may choose not to speak up, allowing racism to go unreported and unchallenged. That's why it's vital we make our stance clear. Children and young people need to hear and see that we are adults who will listen, believe them, and take action. Ensuring our young people have a voice is vital for their well-being, confidence, and sense of empowerment. At Show Racism the Red Card, we are proud to offer our Leaders of Now initiative, available in both primary and secondary schools. Leaders of Now is a long-term programme that empowers young people to challenge racism within their own settings and to have a voice with senior leaders. The Leaders of Now anti-racism groups conduct peer-to-peer research looking at racism and anti-racism in their own settings. With support from Show Racism the Red Card, the findings from this research help shape the group's key priorities, which may include reviewing policies, identifying and addressing barriers to reporting, conducting learning walks or curriculum audits, for example. Some of these learning walks and curriculum audits have examined how well people from global majority backgrounds are represented and reflected. Is the representation there? And is there a diverse range of positive, empowering role models for our pupils? The video on the next slide explores this further.
Every year it's the same old story. Let's talk about Black history, but never Black glory. So our options are either trauma or slavery. And it's not that we don't appreciate the story told in Roots. But how can you teach us about the African family tree and neglect to mention the fruits? So what about the ancient Africans who created medicines, navigations, or technology? Why don't they teach us about the Dogon tribes in Mali who show knowledge of advanced astronomy? Why haven't we ever read a piece of literature or fiction about Cheddar Man, one of the oldest skeletons discovered in Britain? He had blue eyes but dark skin pigment. So you can teach me about Pythagoras' theorem. What about the Ishango or Lobombo bones, the world's oldest mathematical instrument? Is it because it was invented by African women, the world's first mathematicians? Using the bones to track the lunar cycle in villages, they calculated time before your Rolex. So I don't mind talking about black history, but let's not forget the black literacy, black ability, and black dignity. Let's not reduce our history to the pain and fractured pieces. Black history is the history of our species, and no matter the colour of the skin on your face, we are all African, and there is only one human race.
It's important that children see themselves reflected positively, that they see a diverse range of positive role models, as highlighted in the video. At Show Racism in the Red Card, we've long recognised the power of role models in delivering our anti-racism message, particularly through footballers. These public figures often carry influence and respect among young people, making their voices especially powerful when speaking out against racism. For pupils who may not immediately engage with anti-racism conversations, exploring the experiences or actions of sporting role models can be an effective hook. For example, you might discuss footballers taking the knee, why some choose to do so and why others don't. What messages does this send? And what do your pupils think about it? You may also want to think about the books and resources that pupils can access. Are the books you have in school inclusive? Do they reflect all your children in school, as well as the wider world, in terms of ethnicity, nationality, cultures or traditions? Do they feature characters from global majority backgrounds? And are those characters central, positive figures in the stories? Books can have a lasting impact on how we see ourselves and how we might internalise racism. It could be useful to do a book audit with this in mind. We've thought about embedding anti-racism in our resources, but what about in our teaching? In Wales, anti-racism is now part of the curriculum and rooted in the 4 purposes. You'll see a visual here that sets those out. There's a clear need to meaningfully embed the contributions, voices and stories of people from global majority backgrounds, not as add-ons, but as integral parts of the learning experience. Estin carried out a thematic review on well-being in 2019 and made the following observation. Irrespective of the subject they are teaching, teachers sometimes use language or resources that have a negative impact on pupils' well-being or are inconsistent with messages that promote good health. Using resources that do not reflect the diversity of society can leave pupils from underrepresented groups feeling less valued as a result, and risks perpetuating unhelpful stereotypes in other pupils' minds. A case of this is WJEC's review of the use of Mice and Men. It raises important questions, particularly around language, about the impact such texts have on young people. If Black history is only ever explored through the lens of slavery or segregation, what message does that send? How does that promote the idea of our differences as strengths or recognise the full breadth of contributions made by people from global majority backgrounds? This also ties into the concept of Cynefin. Dr. Hugh Griffiths championed the inclusion of this word in the new curriculum, and it remains the only Welsh word included in the English version. In the next video, Dr. Hugh speaks about the significance of Cynefin, the history of Wales, and how citizens from global majority backgrounds are, and have always been, an integral part of that story.
There is only one word in the curriculum for Wales that is Welsh, and that is Cynefin. And I'm so proud that the word Cynefin is in there. It gives us an idea that we should be looking at our feet in order to look outwards at the community, at their Cynefin, at our learners' Cynefin. There are a lot of things that are different within your classroom for your pupils. be that gender, be that race, for example. One of the things that unites us is the idea of conniving. All those pupils in that class come from the same community, come from the same conniving, and that unites them. It's a very, very powerful idea, in my opinion. It comes from the words of the 17th century German writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, that says that parents should give their children two things, roots and wings. Conniving gives them the roots in order to look outwards, in order to develop a confidence in where they're from, a confidence to look outwards at the world. Having taught history for over 20 years in schools here in Wales, it's really sad, reflection on myself, that pupils leave me knowing far more about Nazi Germany and American history than they know about the history of Wales. The new curriculum encourages us to tell the story of Wales. And it's a really powerful, it's an amazing story. So that our learners here in Wales get the opportunity to understand their history and place themselves in order to look outwards, in order to understand what's happening in the world. I'm really proud of us here in Wales that we have a new curriculum that encourages us here in Wales to teach Black, Asian and minority ethnic history. We are leading here in the United Kingdom. Others are looking to us to follow what we're actually doing. I think it's vitally important that we look at this history and look at these stories from a Welsh perspective. There are remarkable stories of Black, Asian, minority ethnic histories here in Wales. I currently work in Powys and I've come across 9 remarkable, amazing stories of Black, Asian, minority ethnic history. If I can find 9 in Powys, well, you can find these stories throughout Wales. I'm really proud of the fact that we here in Wales have a curriculum that's led by the 4 purposes. It's not a content-led curriculum as we have in the past then, which is remarkable coming from a historian who's put so much emphasis upon content in the past during his teaching career. I think it's the type of people that we want to create here in Wales then. I think by putting an emphasis on the community, on the conniving, on the story of Wales and on the world is vitally important. But only by understanding our past have we a confidence to look forward at a new Wales, at a new future for our learners here in Wales.
Let's think about how we can apply that concept of conniving. Lots of young people know the history of Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. These stories are powerful and impactful. However, if viewed in isolation, pupils can be led to believe that racism is something that happened in the past and only in America. It may not be seen as a UK problem. So, how do we bring this into their own understanding? The UK has a rich and diverse history of global majority people, and these stories should be heard. So, we could make a link, for example, to the Bristol bus boycotts. Paul Stevenson was a young social worker who supported a boycott against the Bristol Omnibus Company in 1963, protesting against their refusal to employ Black or Asian drivers or conductors. The boycott was held for 60 days with thousands of Bristolians taking part. The bus company lost a lot of money and was forced to change their policy. These protests resulted in the removal of the colour bar in 1963, and Ragbir Singh became the first global majority conductor for the company. Let's bring this thinking closer to home. Take Vivian White, for example, Cardiff's first black dentist and bus driver. He went on to become Wales's first black youth worker, dedicated years to voluntary service, led the Race Equality Council Wales, and was awarded an MBE for his contributions to the community. Now think about your own local area. How might you connect this work to your school community? Could you draw on local figures or stories? Are you in touch with faith leaders or community groups? What experiences might they share? And how could these enrich your pupils' understanding and sense of belonging? We have several useful free resources to signpost you to. To begin, the BBC has this Betty Campbell teaching pack. Betty Campbell was the first and remains the only black head teacher in Wales. She fought tirelessly for equity. In school, she was told the problems would be insurmountable if she were to become a teacher. Betty Campbell remained resilient and became one of only 6 women to be selected to train at Cardiff Teacher Training College. Betty worked at Mount Stewart in the heart of Butetown, where she became head teacher, putting Black history into her curriculum. This session has been developed as part of DARPL, Diversity and Anti-Racism Professional Learning, with Show Racism the Red Card as one of its key partners. DARPL offers a wide range of resources and training opportunities to support you wherever you are on your anti-racism journey. There are sessions available for teachers, governors and wider school staff, so do take a moment to explore what's on offer through the DARPL website. Map Cymuned is a collection of stories available bilingually from global majority citizens around Wales. There are themes such as arts and crafts, role models and anti-racism. The map is fully interactive and supports a diverse curriculum for Wales. Hanes Cymru Ni celebrates Wales's diversity and showcases stories from global majority citizens from different parts of Wales. The resources are divided into progression steps, supporting curriculum development and helping learners become ethically informed citizens. Here are some examples of the stories from Hanes Cymru Ni. Lower progression steps feature animated videos for younger learners, and higher progression steps additionally contain fact files and hyperlinks to further reading. These resources are available in both Welsh and English. Breath in Cymru is a free, interactive timeline designed for both primary and secondary learners. It offers a rich exploration of Wales's diverse history with biographies and activities for each featured individual. It's another valuable tool to support learning about Wales's global majority citizens and their contributions throughout history, and again is available in both Welsh and English. The Jewish History Association of South Wales have some fantastic educational resources for Key Stage 2 and 3 around the Holocaust that are available for teachers and students in Wales. These resources are bilingual and provide a local context to stories, developing a sense of place and cynefin. We would also recommend taking a look at Solutions Not Sides. This is a useful resource to support conversations with young people about the situation in Israel and Palestine. Using short, focused daily activities with learners is a powerful way to open up conversations around anti-racism, even within a limited time frame. At Show Racism the Red Card, we use an approach called Form Time Thinks. In this example, we've used a screenshot of a headline and asked pupils, what do you see? What do you think? And what do you feel? We've also included a think point around the role of the media in the anti-racism agenda. It's a great way to spark discussion and develop pupils' critical thinking, especially around what they see and hear online. Show Racism the Red Card has a bank of free educational resources on our Education Hub around a variety of topics, all through an anti-racism lens. Visit theredcard.org for further information and to sign up for access to these resources. You will also find Voices on our website, a collection of short videos by people with professional and/or lived experience of racism, discussing topics such as microaggressions, how to be an ally, and impacts of racism. Show Racism the Red Card has also produced a variety of educational packs, such as our anti-racism themed Windrush, Euros, and Olympics and Paralympics packs. The packs include the curriculum links for each activity, which vary in length from 10 minutes to several hours. All of these are free to access and available in both Welsh and English on our website, theredcard.org. Of course, you can also create your own resources. Inspiration can come from anywhere: books, films, magazines, online content, the news, or even a cultural celebration like the International Kite Festival. Every January in Gujarat, India, communities gather to celebrate the festival of Uttaran, filling the skies with beautiful multicoloured kites. The festival marks the changing of the seasons and brings people together through music, dance, food and shared tradition. Families take part across generations and people travel from all over the world to join in. Could you create a scheme of work based on this for your primary school class or for your area of learning? Perhaps you could incorporate looking at the history of kites in different countries, the symbols on them and the significance of these in various cultures. If you do create any lesson plans or schemes of work around this, Show Races in the Red Card would love to hear about them, so drop us an email. Another practical approach is to take a lesson plan you already have and adapt it. So, as we near the end of today's session, here's a reflective task to take away. Look back at a recent lesson plan. How might you adapt it to better embed anti-racism? This could be through the resources you use, the voices and stories you include, or the perspectives you choose to highlight. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments about this session, or if Show Races in the Red Card can support you in any other way, please get in touch. Our contact information is on the screen. Diolch pawb. If you could please complete the online feedback form, we would be most grateful.